Gotta adjust it again. Trying to get the, might have to back it up a bit. I think that's what we'll have to do here. Sorry about that, everybody. I want to get the whole thing in if I can. That's a little better. These last minute adjustments are always kind of a problem, I know. I want you to be able to see all of that if possible. Kind of put me out of the picture. Let's see if I can fix this at all. I know this is a weird time of the day. I've been doing a lot of these at this time of the day, haven't I, lately? Maybe if I put something underneath that, that'll be better. Yeah, that'll work. I can lift it up when the time comes. All right, hello everyone. Today is the 30th of November. I decided to do this now because the rest of this week's going to be kind of crazy. As I mentioned some time ago, we've had some tragedies in the family, and a lot of my warnings were not heeded. That's all I'm going to say about it at this point. Friends as well. It's kind of really a lot of things have happened here in the last little bit. So I'll be busy tomorrow, probably most likely, certainly tomorrow night and Friday it looks like. So anyway, I titled this particular video, A Refuge of Lies. And I'm not doing the presentation in my normal place because I kind of need to see the outside, some of the daylight. And as you know, with my phone camera here, I can't really see the chat. So you might have some questions. I probably won't be able to see them, and I hope you understand that we're going to get into some heavy stuff here. First of all, this is going to be partially about the current political and military situation, just up front, real short. And then I'm going to get into some subject matter that has to do with Elon Musk and with some other related material. As you can see, there's some things here I'm going to talk about, and we'll kind of get into it. We'll just go ahead and hit it. So the first thing is, you can see, if you're paying attention, that the powers that be, particularly those in power in the United States and in Europe, NATO, have been talking about how Russia is going to lose and how Ukraine is winning, and yet we keep having to send money to Ukraine. Your money, by the way, making you poor, and this was all talked about many, many years ago. I mentioned it in prior videos that they would bleed you of your treasure and your blood. They would drain you of your treasure and your blood. And that's how they would take you down, and that's exactly what they're doing in all these foolish wars, especially this one, okay? But the fact of the matter is that Russia has been very patient, and they finally decided, as Colonel Douglas McGregor has explained and others, that they can't reason with the West. The West is an empire of lies run by the United States, and so as a result of that, they're just going to have to go at it. And so they're starting to now. In earnest, and as soon as the ground freezes more, it'll be a 600-mile long front of attack. How they're actually going to do it, what the avenues of attack will be, I don't really know. I don't know their game plan, but it's pretty obvious that it's going to be nasty. So keep your sons and your daughters away from this, I'm telling you. And anything else that this military-industrial complex, intelligence community scam runs on the American people, etc. That's the first thing. Second thing is, of course, I've got to mention Fauci and his lies continue. And unfortunately, along with him, our illustrious, notorious, narcissistic former President Trump will not back off on his position on that entire thing either. So we're running into some real deception here. That's the reason why I call this the Refuge of Lies, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that in the spiritual part, which will be coming up in a few minutes. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that the Marriage Act, which we're actually going to get into here at the bottom, I don't know if you can see that right here. It's probably just out of your sight. We'll have to raise it up. It passed the Senate, and now it goes back to the House, which may be there right now, to vote on the few amendments that were made. By the way, they left Senator Mike Lee's amendment off that this could not be used to go after religious people that do not want to follow this thing for whatever reason. And there have been assurances even by the Mormon Church presidency and all them that, oh, the bill already has information in it that protects us. No, it doesn't. There's a thing called a curtain, and and I'm not sure that's the exact legal term, but any protection that you put up can be penetrated, and this one is wide open. And without Lee's amendment, uh, every denomination, every personal belief that doesn't want to go along with this kind of nonsense, they're going to attack them. Look at what Merrick Garland and Ray have been doing, going after people, the parents who've been trying to protect their kids from these horrible things in the schools. And Merrick Garland says, well, they're resorting to violence by confronting these school boards, etc. And we can't have that. In other words, you can't dissent. And you have a right to protect your children against these incursions. Children need to be brought up with understanding and helping them through the maturation process. And unfortunately, your government doesn't want that. They want them to be manipulated and poisoned. And that's exactly what's happened under the force and violence of government. So it's okay if they use violence, but you can't use violence to protect your kids. And when I say violence, I don't even mean that you're going to beat up somebody or whatever. I'm talking about mere dissent. They're saying, no, that's okay, that's not a problem. Oh, yes, it is. That's exactly how they're looking at this. And it's going to get worse now with this Marriage Act being put into place. We're going down this road very, very quickly, and I don't care whether you're a God-fearing person or not. If you don't see what's happening in D.C. and how this thing has been manipulated across the country with these evil lawyers, judges, attorneys general, et cetera, then your head is in the sand, and you are headed down the road. And as I've said, we're not going to be able to do much as people, I don't think. There's some other things I'm going to bring up today that may impact it a little bit. But we're so evil right now that I really think that Russia is going to just... What's going to happen is we're going to fall into the way this will pan out, I think, is Russia's not going to have to invade us or anything. We're going to descend into economic chaos, which is part of the Klaus Schwab, Noah Harari, UN, New World Order plan anyway, so it fits right in. We'll descend into economic chaos, which we already are, and certainly Europe is. And if you're listening to Alexander Mercouris and Alex Christoforou about this whole thing with the attack on Europe by the Americans economically, this is going to backfire and it's going to take us down too. But that's part of the plan, okay? So once that occurs and once we fall apart, then roaming gangs, crime, civil war like you'd never imagined could be on our doorstep. So again, you've got to prepare for that. Russia will defeat NATO and the U.S. And really they already have. It's just a matter of time before this Ukraine thing is settled, because Russia's being very careful about how it proceeds. But make no mistake about it, and some people are even saying this now, that they're in control. They're in control of the situation. So that, again, getting back to this Marriage Act situation, shows how degenerate and depraved we are. Our law enforcement institutions used to protect children against such things, and now they're protecting those who conduct those attacks on our children and our families. So they're at war with you, and anything about them protecting this minority out there is just a front so that they can destroy you and your loved ones. Biden even said during an interview with a particular individual who has had a change, when this individual said that they were how many months into this change, Biden and his evil side said, well, God bless you. So you got to wonder what God he's talking about. Well, certainly isn't the God that pushes and encourages, pardon me, encourages the proper associations, as I've talked about for so long, between men and women and the raising of families and those things. They're entirely against that. If you don't understand this now, you really need to look into it and gather those of like minds around you You're not going to be able to do much about it. I'm not saying locally, counties and states, you shouldn't be active there, but activity at the federal government, the presidential elections, all this is just waste of time. You got to do stuff locally, and I won't go into any more than that. There are people far more able to conduct those types of things than I am. My reputation precedes me, as most of you know, so I don't go very far in organizations, even though I know what's going on and what to do. That's just the way it is. Okay, so we've talked about that. In the description box below is some information on Felicia Lockhart and Lockhart Perspective. There's a link there, as I mentioned a few days ago. Derek Brose is going to be her guest, and I think this will be a very interesting interview. I would encourage you to go listen to it. As I said, the link is in the description box. It will give you the time and all that so that you can go watch it. And I'm not saying you have to agree with everything he says. Of course not. You don't agree with everything I say. I don't agree with everything Chuck Baldwin says. I don't agree with everything Dr. Michael Heiser says, et cetera, et cetera. The point is that talking about these things, we were able to get through them and to think, because as I've seen, a lot of people talk about Jesus being the Logos, there in the Gospel of John. In the beginning was the Word was with God, the Word was God. And I've talked about the Aleph Tav and its relationship to the Alpha and Omega. But that's really what John's talking about there. And it's called the Logos. Logos isn't faith, ladies and gentlemen. It's not belief. It's not, I believe, and because you can believe that a little yellow dog in Missouri wagging its tail is God, and that doesn't make it so. Logos means reason. It means dialectic. It means discussion. It means interaction, but primarily reason. So all those who say that faith and reason are incompatible, they're wrong. Okay, as a matter of fact, it's right in the name there, Logos. And of course, in the Old Testament, where much of the New Testament is drawn, God in there talks about this point of reasoning together and doing the right thing, not following false gods, which that can be a long discussion. We're going to kind of touch on it here just a little bit in just a minute. So anyway, go listen to Derek Brose. Also, I noticed today that Trey Smith, those of you who know about God in a Nutshell and Trey Smith, he put up a very good video on Psalms 37. Talked about how David, King David, whether you believe that it's true history or just allegorical, it doesn't matter, the lessons are there. King David, when he went out against Goliath, he not only wanted wisdom, he wanted God's heart. And later on, of course, it said, the scripture says that David was a man after God's own heart. So David wanted both God's heart and wisdom, where his son Solomon was only interested in wisdom and how it got him in trouble. Sure, David got in trouble with Uriah and Bathsheba, but he realized it in the end. Okay, so that was good. So anyway, I encourage you to go to Trey Smith's channel on YouTube. God in a Nutshell, Trey Smith. It's spelled Trey. That's Smith, Trey Smith. I should have had the link in the description box, but when I thought about putting it up, it was too late. So you can go find it. I think it's a very worthwhile presentation. It's about 30 minutes long, and I think Trey did a really good job. Again, of course I don't agree with everything Trey does, as he certainly doesn't agree with probably very much of anything that I say. But that doesn't matter. This conversation is where our minds and hearts need to be, and that's why I encourage it. So we have some things happening in the next 30 to 60 days that are very, very critical. This entire thing of changing the very landscape of the man-woman relationship now at a federal level, which isn't supposed to happen, by the way. That's a state issue, but like we know, the federal government's been a problem with the Constitution having been written so that eventually, in fact, the central government would take precedence, and that's unfortunate, and everybody knew that it was going to happen that knew anything. And I won't go into the history of that, but Legal Man on Twitter covers it pretty well, and I certainly understand it. Hopefully you can hear me. I'm talking out a little louder because I've got the phone with the camera back a little ways, but I think that pretty much sums up the things that I'm concerned about right now that are facing us. FTX, of course, with the whole Ukraine thing was a money laundering organization or operation. That's been coming out. getting money back to our corrupt politicians and officials, etc., laundering it to Ukraine as if it's to fight the war, which it's not. Again, it's to drain you of your treasury and to put you under slavery. That's the reason, and our politicians have either gone along with it, or they do nothing about it, or they just squeak and moan and don't really sound the alarm the way they should. Frankly, Tulsi Gabbard's done a better job of that, and so has Thomas Massey than most anybody else. Of course, Tulsi Gabbard's not in the government right now, but she's been there both in the military and the political level. That doesn't mean I totally trust her, but it's interesting some of the things that she's saying and how this is starting to add up on her side. Okay, that's enough of that. Unless I see a question on something that's occurring right now, I'm going to move on now from that general political military discussion to this. And you may find this interesting. It may disturb you. You might think, Roy, you're way out there. You're going out way out of line here. Hey, sometimes you have to stretch out a little bit to really get an understanding of things. And so, again, one of the things I did when I followed Derek Bros for a while, not closely, okay, just like who we got here. Oh man, I can't see that. Let me see. I think that's who I think it is. Yeah, BP Earthwatch. Hi. The EU is saying that the Ukraine army has been destroyed. Yeah, I know. That's why I say everything that Milley's saying now and the U.S. government, all that, it's all a lie. The Russian army is about ready to squash anybody that gets in their way, and I can't blame them. I can't blame them. I think you know how I feel about that, Jesse. Okay, and I called that months and months ago, as did people like Colonel Douglas McGregor, guys like that. It's interesting how they've thrown us aside. The people can read these things, and they go with people like Milley and the neocons and all those people. Okay, so the EU is in trouble. They're going to have to back away from the U.S. and the U.S. I guess is even considering this is all underneath the table. Of course, I guess. Bloomberg came out here earlier this week. I heard Alexander Mercouris and Alex Christoforou talking about it, where there's some rumors that, Bloomberg did come out and try to give the Biden administration a way out, saying that they've actually accomplished their strategic objective by causing Russia to bleed and all this. And it's all hogwash, but Biden may take it, he may not. I don't think the neocons want out of it that easy. They want to destroy more. They want to kill more. They want people to bleed. They're evil, just plain evil. Okay, getting back to Derek Bros here. Like I said, I don't follow him really close. I do most of my own study. I will go like with Trey Smith and Derek Bros and Michael Heiser and Robert Eisenman, people like that, Chuck Baldwin, to kind of make sure that I'm not too far off balance. That's important. Although people would say, well, Roy, you've been off balance for a long time. Okay, at least in the minds of many people. But I've studied these things in the original languages for so long now, and I understand not all, a number of the prophetic methods that I'm going to talk about a little bit of that today. And Derek Bros brought up a thing about Elon Musk and that Elon calls himself El, which of course means God in Hebrew, but it's also a link to Baal, as some of you would know. It doesn't necessarily mean Baal or Baal. It can mean just God in Hebrew, and a lot of people try to equate it with Baal in every instance, and it's not. But regardless, he brought up this thing about Elon Musk, and I have a lot of questions about Elon Musk, as I told you the other day about this thing where he insisted that sex is only for procreation, and I pointed out that that's for the lower animals, that it's only for procreation. In mankind, it's designed to build emotional, spiritual, physical relationships as well as bring out children. But he won't go there because he's a social Darwinist, in fact, an avowed agnostic, but possibly an atheist, actually. He might be like Ray Kurzweil, where he and Bill Gates and Noah Harari and people like that who think that they're going to become God. And that's why I thought I'd bring this up. So before I go too much further, let me give you some good news. And the good news is Again, Trey Smith's presentation, it's down here on Psalms 37, if you can see that here. Psalms 37, right here. And I threw in Psalms 82 here because Psalms 82 is really what you're watching happen right now here on the earth. It's the war in heaven moved to the earth is really what it is. And along with that, you might also want to look at Isaiah chapter 3 and Isaiah chapter 4. And then you can jump up to where I got the title for this video, Refuge of Lies. That's Isaiah 28. You can see that there. Isaiah 28, 17, about the refuge of lies. Because their refuge of lies will be swept away. The hail will sweep away their refuge of lies. Or in some cases, they say a deluge. But at any rate, those are all promises. And whether you believe in the scriptures or not, you should at least read those so that you can kind of get a feeling for where we are in regards to those. Okay, Psalms 37 is particularly beautiful. It talks about, along with Isaiah 28, the destruction of the wicked that they'll bring on themselves, and that we just need to, we need to be active, we need to participate, but we need to primarily pray, stay out of the way. Okay, all right. So let's go to this thing that Derek Brose was talking about, and I decided I needed to bring it up. There are some other things I could talk about too, and I mentioned on Twitter today. I'll say this real quick. There's some interesting things about the Holocaust, and I'm talking about the one in Germany. I don't want to get into it too deep, but believe it or not, it ties in with what's considered to be the Noahide laws. Okay, and I'm going to be careful how I talk about this, because it's not going to be appreciated by YouTube or a lot of other people. But the Holocaust is actually a Koine Greek term. It's taken from some other terms, one of which is from the Hebrew, Olah, I'm trying to remember the word now, Korban. Olah Korban, which means burnt offering. And I think it's interesting that that's the term that was used, especially by the Yiddish-speaking Jewish people, to describe what happened in Germany in the 30s and 40s. That they would even, they didn't call it that initially. They called it Shoah and some other things, but then eventually, it was quite a bit later. It was in like the 60s, maybe early 70s, when the term Holocaust became more widespread. Why would they admit that Gentiles are making a burnt offering of Jews? And there are two reasons. And I mentioned it on Twitter, and if you go up to the community post on my YouTube channel here, you will see a post that I did this morning about this very subject. And it basically brings up some questions. That being the first, why would they be willing to call it a burnt sacrifice or offering of their own people by Goyim or Gentiles? And secondly, it brings up some other questions, the most important being, what are the parameters for the Messiah? Does the sacrifice of the Jewish people in certain minds of certain Jewish people actually being the sacrifice of the Messiah? In other words, what I've talked about several times is the Messiah without metaphor. And furthermore, who would have ordered that action against those people? In fact, it was some of their own. So it goes along with this idea of sacrifice. So we'll get into some of that with the laws of Noah in a minute. Okay, we're going to go back to Elon. And Derek Brose talked about Elon making a video. And he did this about 4 years ago, I think. But the information that came out of that is that Elon Musk often calls himself just by his nickname L, which of course means God, basically. It can mean ball, but it depends on the context, but it usually does mean God. And in fact, the word Elon in Hebrew means tree, which, as I've explained in the past, trees are often used as metaphors for men. Even the tree of life, a metaphor for God, just so you know. Anyway, it's word 363 in the Strongs if you want to go see it, and it is tree. And it's basically Aleph, Yod, Lamed, Nun, the final form of Nun. Elon is actually how it's pronounced, but Elon is an interesting name. Uh, Now, you might say, well, what's this El Elyon thing? Well, that means the Most High God or the God Most High. Why did I bring this up? As I mentioned in some of my Hebrew lessons, there are rabbinic and prophetic tools that are used to prophecy, especially in the Hebrew alphabet, to hide messages, to bring up hidden truths, to make connections that you normally wouldn't make. And among those techniques, and I talked about it also in one of my tweets today and in the community post that I made. There's Notaricon, which is, and I talked about that before, which is taking each letter of the Hebrew word and breaking it down to its individual meaning so that you get a better, fuller understanding of what the word is. That's Notaricon. Then there's Gematria, that's the numbers game. You know, when you compare a word with one Gematria with another word with the same Gematria, or just transferring information. A lot of people call it numerology, but it's primarily specifically with the Hebrew alphabet and interchanging letters, which brings us to the third type, which is known as Thashrak or Temura. And what Thashrak and Temura are, it's either moving the letters of the Hebrew word around, or even adding or subtracting letters to try to get a message across. And I gave an example of that in Isaiah, where he spelled Cyrus or Koresh once with a Vav and once without it. You don't know what I'm talking about. A Vav is the sixth letter of the Hebrew alphabet, and in one time that he spells out Koresh, he uses a Vav in the middle, and the next time he doesn't. He didn't do that by accident. It's to draw attention to it. It's a prophetic method. Well, Thashrak and Temur are the changing around of the letters. So I went and I thought, you know what, Elon, even though it means tree, it could be that if you add a few letters here to that, just change using the same phonetic sounds, basically, you could come up with El Elyon. El Elyon, again, means God Most High. And I'm not going to tell you how I did this, and the rabbis right now who are watching this are absolutely pulling their hair out what's left. There's a scripture that says, you know, that the innocent will have their hair pulled out by the follicles, right, ripped out. Well, they're ripping their own out right now because they don't like me talking about this stuff. But Elon could very easily be very, very close to El Elyon, and that's why he has that name. That he's calling himself that smart. I'm not saying it's a fact. I'm saying that it's something to take into consideration. It's not absolute, but I think that there are some, especially using this Thashrak and Temura, there's definitely some similarities here that need to be considered. So tree is Aleph, Yod, Lamed, Nun. Aleph is the aw sound, aw. El Elyon is the, which is right here, is El is Aleph Lamed, El. Elyon is Ayin, Lamed, Yod, Vav, Nun. So what you're doing here is basically you're just exchanging the ah sound with the a sound and the aleph to the a sound and the ayin, and you're adding and you're switching around just slightly. You see there's a llama here in the name for tree. So in Thashrak and Temura, you just reverse those, and then you're adding this this vav. Very possible that Elon knows this, or other people, and they might be sending a message out about what they think he is. And this would very much go along with some people being very worried about Elon Musk. I'm not saying it's a fact. I don't think he, at least at the present time, he doesn't hold the political offices or military offices, for that matter, to really qualify him to be any of those individuals in either Daniel or in Revelation. But It's just how they view it, okay? We're talking about these people that are in these secret societies and how they view these things. So you never know. This might be an issue that you might want to just consider. I don't know if you understand what I'm talking about here, but again, Thashrak and Tamora is either replacing certain letters with others or rearranging them in the words themselves, or a combination of both. And that's, I mean, you can almost see that in this word here, Elon and El Elyon. Again, El Elyon means Most High God or God Most High. Real quick on that, so let's change to the Noahide laws. And again, I bring this up because this is a real issue that has been twisted around, and I want to give you a little history. There are Noahide laws, and they are in Genesis, and we're going to read that. It's in Genesis 9 for those of you who are interested. But if you know what the Noahide laws are, there are a number of them. Some people say 7, some people say 9. But you can go look those up on the internet. I'm not going to load them on here. I just want to make you aware that they exist. And that there has been a big push to force the Noahide laws on everyone, on the entire world. And they've had some success in the United States with that. I'm going to say categorically here that the Noahide laws are not, as they are put together, that as you find them, are not scriptural. They're not what they are in Genesis. Okay, they're quite a bit different. The actual Noahide laws that are being pushed are not taken from Torah, not taken from Genesis, even though the rabbis and people that are pushing them will say it comes out of Genesis 9. The fact of the matter is, it comes out of the Talmud, the Babylonian Talmud at that. So I wanted to read this so that you can see what the real Noahide laws are. Like I said, by the way, I've looked at this in the Hebrew using those same techniques, the Tarkhan, Gematria, Thashrak, Tamora. And there's nothing significantly different that the rabbis who pushed the Noahide laws could have done to alter what it says here in Genesis. They went too far, in other words. And why did they do it? Well, I'll leave that up to you, but it usually has to do with control, okay, of some sort. Well, let's read this. I'm going to put my glasses on. This is where the Noahide laws come from. It's chapter 9 of Genesis. Let's read it real quick. I'm only going to read like 12 verses, so it won't take long. But compare this, and you can go look it up yourself. Go look up the Noahide laws. Put those next to Genesis here when you're reading it and compare, and where they pull some of this stuff out of, okay, because it's not here. So let's read it. And God blessed Noah and his sons and said unto them, be fruitful and multiply and replenish the earth. Okay, good. And you do that with men and women, okay? In other words, that right there says, okay, there's none of this other activity outside of the man-woman relationship. I'll just put that. But unfortunately, the rabbis push this to mean adultery too, and nowhere in here does it mention that. Why? I've done some presentations on these things, and I would just say for you to go back and look at those, okay? Because adultery isn't defined as mere sex. It's a man having sex with a married woman specifically in the Bible is what it means. In other words, it means robbing a man of his wife is what it means. And verse 2, and the fear of you and the dread of you shall be upon every beast of the earth, and upon every fowl of the air, upon all that moveth upon the earth, and upon all the fishes of the sea. Into your hand are they delivered. And listen to this. For those who get stuck on the kosher laws and, you should only eat certain things, well, listen to this. Verse 3, every moving thing that liveth shall be meat for you. Even as the green herb have I given you all things. So you can eat anything. Okay, it's probably not a good idea to eat certain things, and that's spelled out later in Leviticus, but at any rate, this was the Noahide law. So if you like pork, it's not a sin. Not for you, okay? I don't like it for lots of reasons, but anyway. But he qualifies that. God qualifies it, and he says, but flesh with the life thereof, which is the blood thereof, shall you not eat. In other words, you don't take the blood. You drain the blood out. Okay, that's the requirement. You don't drink the blood. And then he qualifies a little further, and he says, and surely Your blood of your lives will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man. In other words, you don't kill something without necessity. Sport killing is not a good idea. Okay? Even animal sport killing is not a good idea. You'll be held responsible for every beast that you slay. If it's for food and for your raiment and for your use, that's okay. That later became a situation where the Levites were using it, that you had to conduct a sacrifice by the priests themselves on the altar, or else the meat was sacrificed to idols, and that was bad. Well, that was an economic decision. This didn't require that. This just said you got to use that. You'll be required. If you kill a beast, God will say, why did you do that? Did you do it for fun? Did you do it for self-defense? Did you do it for food? Whatever. You see, the why you did is more important than what you did. And it goes back to thou shalt not kill. I know that's about mankind, but he even talks about that here, where he'll require your blood if you kill a man, which goes to that commandment. And I told you that it has a zade in it, zade being righteous or innocent. So the real point of it is if you take an innocent life, all right? Not if you kill something, but if you take an innocent life. So again, and surely your blood of your lives, this is verse 5, will I require. At the hand of every beast will I require it, and at the hand of man, at the hand of every man's brother will I require the life of man. Whoso sheddeth man's blood, by man shall his blood be shed, for he is in the image of God, made he man. And you, ye be fruitful. And he says this a second time, right? How important this is. Ye be fruitful and multiply, bring forth abundantly in the earth, and multiply therein. And God spake unto Noah and to his sons with him, saying, and I, behold, I establish my covenant with you, and with your seed after you, and with every living creature. And then he goes on to talk about he won't destroy the earth by flood again. If you know what the Noahide laws are, you'll see that they don't match up with Genesis 9. There are some things there that apply, or that you can even somewhat expand upon. But in fact, what happened is that the rabbis took this, and in the Talmud, they came up with their own law. Now, Jesus refuted against that. If you believe in Jesus, Jesus came against the scribes and Pharisees for setting up stakes and commandments of Ben, doctrines of Ben as commandments. Well, the Noahide laws are an example of that. And one of the problems with the Noahide laws, just one, is the situation about idolatry. If you can read anything in there where God demands this loyalty to Him, I guess you could say, well, if you pay attention to what He's saying, that's it. But nowhere in there does it condemn anybody for having a different belief. Nowhere. And yet in the Noahide laws, they talk about idolatry. It's not in there. It's not in there. And I took this apart using the Tarkhan, Tamora, Thashrag, Gematria, like I said, and even in the expansive versions of the Hebrew, it does not exist. So the rabbis made that up for themselves and to have control over people. And under the Noahide laws, the way they have them set up, if you believe in Jesus Christ, you are an idolater, and they have a right to cut your head off. Did you know that? According to their Talmudic laws of Noahide covenant. Problem. Are they any different than the Islamic people who insist that you worship Allah at the cost of your life if you don't? No, it's no different. It's the same thing. And we're talking about the same group of people. And I'm going to go out on a limb here, and hopefully I don't get thrown off of YouTube for it. But the term anti-Semite is used primarily only for Jews. Well, that's not right. Abraham had Ishmael. He's Ishmael by Hagar. He's by definition a Semite. Esau was a Shemite. There were other sons of Shem, not just the ones that came down to Abraham and then through Abraham. There were a lot of other sons of Shem. And so for these people to constantly bring up anti-Semitism as being just the Jewish thing, it's really wrong. And really what they're doing is they're trying to take something that applies to many members of mankind, many members of the human race, and applying it only for themselves and their particular political interests, not even necessarily religious. Like I said, I'm going out on a line there. It could get me in trouble, but sometimes you just got to speak truth, right? Okay, so that's the deal with the laws of Noah, and I've already explained that I don't see any correlation between what's written in the Talmud and pushed as being the Noahide laws and what's in Genesis 9. It just doesn't exist. And then finally, I brought up this thing with the Marriage Act. And I just put a note down here at the bottom. And I said the FBI law enforcement used to protect parents and children from these violators, these encroachments upon the family. Not anymore. Now they are directly opposed, these FBI and these law enforcement agencies, directly opposed to the protection of children and families, and are exerting all of their efforts to protect and promulgate those who oppose families and children. And they do it under some pretense of, oh, well, if you try to protect your, and Merrick Garland and Ray really show their true colors here. Okay, if somebody is trying to force information to your child without your consent, you should have priority over that, and you should have the say so. And I don't think I need to go into that in any great detail. I think anybody with common sense would understand that. And my son says, well, that's just the problem, Dad. There is no common sense. You have to have uncommon sense these days. There's a lot of truth to that. But at any rate, so this attack on the family has now gotten to the point where it's sanctioned by the state. State no longer. In my court case, I read where they said, the family is the bedrock of society, right? That was in 1983. And now, in 2000, almost 2023, 40 years later, they say, oh no, the family's not the bedrock. As a matter of fact, it's evil. It's the center where all these difficulties come, and that we have to destroy it. At least we have to protect the other forms. I'm just going to say here, okay. Even though these are manifestly destructive to mankind. What do I say? All right, I've already gone for 40-something odd minutes. Maybe I shouldn't read Psalms 37. I'll just tell you to go do that. I'll read the first couple of verses. All right, Psalms 37. Then you can go to Psalms 82, Isaiah 3, Isaiah 4, and Isaiah 28. It might give you some hope, okay? Faith, hope, and charity. Yeah, well, something definitely is going to have to happen here. And I talk a lot about Malachi 4 and about the sons and daughters rising up against these tyrannies and things. But let's read Psalms 37 here. All right. And then maybe I'll try to take some questions if I can see that, but I don't think I'll be able to. I know this was fast, and this whole thing with Thashrak, Tamora, and Notarkon, people are scratching their heads going, what the heck are you talking about? That's why the rabbis can do to you what they do. I'm not saying all rabbis are bad anymore. I'm saying all Catholic priests are bad or anything else. But there are people out there who have an agenda, and your welfare and well-being and your true spiritual development is not amongst their concerns. Psalm 37. So let's just read just a couple lines of this, and you'll kind of get a feeling for what it's about, okay? Psalm 37, starting at verse 1. Fret not thyself because of evildoers, neither be thou envious against the workers of iniquity. For they shall soon be cut down like the grass, and wither as the green herb. Trust in the Lord and do good. So shalt thou dwell in the land, and verily thou shalt be fed. Delight thyself also in the Lord, and he shall give thee the desires of thine heart. Go ahead and read the rest of that. And it should give you, it's a lot like Psalms 23 in some regards. 23rd Psalm in some regards, but it shows what can happen to the wicked. Do we absolutely have to depend only on God? No, we have to act in some way ourselves. We have to participate. We have to be willing to stand up. As a matter of fact, I heard Chuck Baldwin, one of the things I disagree with him, and he talks about, the works of the old law, those are done away. You don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to act. You don't have to do that. And then he turns around and he says, you need to stand up for the truth. Well, that's a work. Taking some action to stand up for the truth is an act of work. Just like James said, James, the brother of Jesus, in the Epistle of James says, you know, if talking about being, if, you know, saved by what you do as well. As a matter of fact, that's really what he talks about, is being saved by what you do. And then God could fill in the blanks. I might add another thing here too. Ooh, this is going to make everybody really mad. Faith without works is dead, according to James, right? What works are we talking about? Well, you do have to do something. There's no doubt you have to do something. You can't just sit by and let evil go you can't let evil go unchallenged. Let me read something here in Romans, and then I'll take questions. You know, I've done a lot of these videos about marriage, sex, men and women's relationships. I refute the virgin birth of Jesus. It's not the virgin birth that the Christians have come about. That God came into a woman who had never had sex. I'm not saying God couldn't do that. I'm saying He wouldn't do that, and there's plenty of evidence to show it. And then I had somebody ask me, and they said, well, gee, if you don't believe in the Immaculate Conception, which is different than the virgin birth, by the way, the Immaculate Conception is Mary, meaning somehow she was conceived without, the appreciation of the man for the woman. It's all nonsense. But I was asked, well, if you don't believe in the Immaculate Conception, and I'm going to say the virgin birth because this person was not really sure what they were talking about, how can you believe in the resurrection? Well, because the resurrection isn't anti-scriptural. You know, Ezekiel talks about it. You know, the salvation in Genesis is there. You've got Job saying, you know, that in his flesh he shall see God. You know, there are these things, and it's and under quantum physics, those of you who have studied the Shroud of Turin, you know, David said in the Psalms, he says, and I know that you will not allow your Holy One to see corruption. And that miraculous event, the body was already formed in his mother by, I'm going to say, a sexual act, not by the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit was just there to help. Well, anyway, that's another story. It's basically just saying that the proper spirit inhabited that zygote, then that fetus, and then that child. That's all I'm saying. But the situation with this whole thing with, I kind of lost train there, what my thought was, but basically, as you can tell, I'm not for this situation with that, and I've talked about it for a long time. The resurrection. So the resurrection on the quantum scale, it says, the scientists that have been talking about this, that go along with the possibility that the Shroud of Turin really is what it says it is, because they have this evidence of this energy. Well, we know that energy is what powers our bodies. And the theory, one of the theories now is, and it's on the quantum level, is that when the moment Jesus expired, the resurrection began at that very moment. So like David said, thou shalt not allow thy Holy One to see corruption. The rejuvenation of his living cells began immediately, and apparently it was like a cascading effect. If you haven't read these studies on this particular thing, it's really fascinating. So basically, there are billions of cells in the body, and of course billions of subcells and all that stuff. So apparently it takes, scientifically, in a human body, they did the math, and it would take about 2 to 3 days for this cascading effect of the energy to bring everything back to its working condition. So scientifically, you can do that. Now, virginity, you can be artificially inseminated, but you're still having a penetration, right? Okay? But there were other methods that would have been done. If it wasn't by Mary's husband, it was by a surrogate. And I'll just leave it at that. I'm not going to go any further. But there are people in the sacred temples that stand in these different positions as angels and etc. And I'm not going to go any deeper than that. Maybe sometime in the future I will. But I've often said, well, if Paul talks about the resurrection, James doesn't really talk about it, and others. But it's really odd, and I don't have a lot of respect for Paul. I know what he was really about. Most of you who follow me know that. But it's interesting that, as important as the virgin birth is to Pauline Christianity and to, things like, modern day Christianity, or even from the first century, second century on, uh, they expound it as being this absolute truth. Well, let's go to Romans. Romans 1. Let's read this for a minute, okay? Romans chapter 1. Paul, a servant of Jesus Christ, called to be an apostle, separated unto the gospel of God, which he had promised afore by his prophets and holy scriptures, concerning his Son Jesus Christ our Lord, which was made of the seed of David, according to the flesh. Wait a minute. Why didn't Paul just say, who was born of a woman who never had sex with anything, but God just inseminated her? He didn't say that. So this idea of the virgin birth, even when Paul, and I'm not saying that it was necessarily Paul, this could be a pseudepigrapha, but regardless, at this point in time when this thing was written, the concept of the virgin birth as modern day Christians look at, especially Roman Catholics, isn't anywhere to be found. My explanation about a virgin being an alma, a young woman, and having a firstborn son is really what it's about. Let's keep reading. So I'm going to read that again. Concerning his Son, Jesus Christ our Lord, which was made of the seed of David, according to the seed of flesh. And they'll say, well, that's just Mary. Well, there's a question if Mary was even a Judahite. She was most likely a Levite, but anyway. And declared to be the Son of God with power. Declared to be the Son of God. The Nicene Creed is a long way away from us. And declared to be the Son of God with power according to the Spirit of holiness by the resurrection from the dead. So he'll talk about the resurrection. Nowhere in here does he talk about a virgin birth. Quite the contrary, he says, Son of Jesus Christ our Lord, which was made of the seed of David, according to the flesh. I rest my case. All right, let's see if I can see this. I don't know if I can. If anybody has any questions. Do you know a bought PM? I don't know what that means. I'm going to have a hard time seeing this. I've got to have that so bright to illuminate the room that it's really hard for me to see the chat, like I've always said. Elon has slipped. Well, I don't want to get into that. I can tell you a story about that, though, that would be kind of interesting to you. I'm going to raise this up a little bit so I don't have to lean down so far. Okay, let's do this. Okay, all right, let's see what it says here. Elon Musk had a. I can't read that. Yeah, okay. So, yeah, Kalergi plan, that's the idea of mixing the races and taking away, which has been debunked, of course, by most everybody. But I think it's true because I can see it manifestly happening. Replacing the white race, yeah. It's destroying the white race and replacing it, yeah. Apollyon, El Elyon, no, not the same thing. Sorry, Apollyon, no. Apollyon is associated with Apollo, and it's the god of the sun, and it's not the same as El Elyon in the Hebrew. Nope, sorry. People that you think, you got to be careful because the etymology of these things isn't like you're often told. I've actually told you something that's closer to that. Elon and El Elyon are actually quite close, especially when you use Thashrak and Tamura. But Apollyon and El Elyon, or Elon, no. I see what you're saying also. Apollyon, well, it still doesn't work. I guess you could make a case for it, but I've made a case that because Trump is so he likes to associate himself with Apollo, and even has a lot of things with Apollo in his living areas that he thinks he's that. But that's the bad side of things. So maybe I don't think Elon would quite make that. I think he would be more like to make this connection than that. Um, Trump, on the other hand, seems to have no problem with linking himself to Apollyon, which is kind of interesting. Oh, okay. So you're saying the Baphomet of Elon's? Yeah. And he even wore that suit at Halloween, and there's some other things in his background. Yeah, I see what you're saying, and yeah, well, that's why I brought this up because there are some things worried about here. But a lot of the elites are this way. They've got this mixture of, but because they know they actually take it. I've said this before. They actually take their game plan out of here. They think this is for them. And I can't argue with them. You have to be able to rightly divide the Word of God. I've often said that this isn't the ineffable, immutable, infallible Word of God manifestly. Right? I even showed you that with the two genealogies in Matthew and Luke of Jesus. They don't match up, which means one of them has to be wrong, or both. Just things like that. Let me see here. Weather forecasters are never right. No, they never are. It's one of the businesses like politics where you can be wrong all the time and still get promotions and money. I don't know. Noah Hyde says no false idols, and they say, yeah, that's right. That's why I say it's. See, and there's nowhere in Genesis 9 it says that. It's an interpolation in the Talmud. And yeah, if you it's just, the no-hide laws just go too far. Yeah, and according to the way they interpret that, they can cut your head off for believing in Jesus. Exactly right. Yep, they sure can. All right, Allah. Yeah, Allah is actually in the Old Testament. Um, yeah, and I've talked about that before. It doesn't mean that the Muslim way of things is right, or that concept of God is right, but that's still in the Old Testament. It comes right out of there. The Testament, yeah, I see a lot of evidence in the New Testament that there are problems, lots and lots and lots of them. Virgin thing is one of them. It's as I just showed you in Romans 1. The concept of the virgin birth in the way it's understood in traditional Christianity is nowhere backed up, even in the New Testament itself. Even in Romans 1 there, it's not backed up with it, right? Yeah, there's something else going on there. Okay, it's almost been an hour. I'm having a hard time seeing this. I'm sorry. It's just Jesus walked on water means being above the law of the sea. Yeah. I like that. I think I don't think that's the way it was intended before, but I like that interpretation. I think that works. Yeah, maritime law. Yeah, the law of the land is the real land as opposed to the law of the sea. Yeah, I like that. That's a good analogy. Wow, got a lot of. Okay, yeah, I'm not going to be able to get through all this. I'm so sorry. God said He would hate the modern church. Yeah. Um, Chuck Baldwin gave a good sermon on that, and I talked about it the other day. The church is basically has become, by and large, a tool of the government. Yeah, and that's been the case for at least since the time of Johnson's presidency, and probably even before. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I'll get out of your hair. I just wanted to bring this information to you. Again, I know that, and this might be a stretch that I've shown you here on Elon and El Elyon. I don't think it's connected to Apollyon. Elon, I don't think that's what he's talking about. Not saying he isn't, but I don't mind those types of associations, at least to think about them, because what they do is more important than what they say, right? Anybody can say anything. It's what they do that counts. And there are some problems there, as I've already pointed out, with, for instance, with a Christian quoting Elon Musk about sex is only for procreation. And that means that he's a social Darwinist. He doesn't understand the spiritual, and neither did that Christian that used Elon Musk to back her up. They don't understand the physical, that it's more than just physical, it's more than just a sexual drive. It's an emotional, spiritual, um, and physical. It's on all the planes, and that's what it's supposed to do for us. For us, it's supposed to check all those boxes. Okay? All right. That's all I got. I hope you found that at least of some interest. I know this will probably confuse a lot of people, and they'll be shaking their head. That's okay. Go look it up. Go see in the description box the link to Felicia Lockhart's interview with Derek Bros, which is this evening at some point. I'm not sure of the time, but that'll tell you. And they'll give you the link so you can go to it and watch it live. I have no idea what they're going to talk about, but I think these things are good. And again, Trey Smith on this thing with Psalms 37, he just put it up just today or just yesterday. It's the most recent one. And it's about David and Goliath and Solomon and getting God's heart and his wisdom, not just his wisdom. Okay. That's all I got for you. I can't see, it's too bright. You all take care. Have a great day.